Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and we're here today with another episode of Page Chewing. So we have some very special guests. We'll get to them here in a minute. PL, did you want to start us off with some introductions?
P.L. Stewart, author of the Drowned Kingdom Saga, and honored to be one of the co-hosts with Steve of Page Chewing. Um, I think this is episode 30, I believe. Is this
I
30?
think it's 30. Yeah.
31.
31?
31.
Wow. Yeah. Time flies. And
Yeah.
we're extremely honored to have these fabulous guests today. Mihir, obviously dear friend of the channel, and fantastic, the beating heart behind Fantasy Book Critic, and uh, phenomenal breakout author Gourav Mohanty. With everybody's flashing Sons of Darkness all over there. I get FOMO. I haven't gotten it yet, and everybody keeps holding up. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get that book. So it's amazing. So we're honored to have both of you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, just for people who don't know, I'm Gourav Mohanty. I'm the author of Sons of Darkness. And my Tinder profile says that I'm also a lawyer and a stand-up comedy on the side. But I'm really excited to have this conversation, especially with Mihir, who's really helped my book reach the worldwide audience. So he's like the guardian angel, the whole godmother factor in the Cinderella story. So I'm really happy to join this conversation alongside him.
Well, that's totally false, A. And B, hi everyone, I'm Mihir Wanchu.
It's not you, I don't think.
Can you all hear me, or is it too bad?
Not sure what happened there. Let me see.
Well, everybody knows me. I'm just going to mute myself to see if that works.
Oh, I think Gourav, I think it's yours. Your mic.
I'm getting.
Let's see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're settled down. So sorry, go ahead, Mihir.
I think it's a rival YouTube channel which has decided to hack your.
There we go.
Well, like I said, I'm here, Wanchu, besides the interruption. And thanks to Steve and Paul for inviting me back over here. I feel like, I'm actually, I'm just a hanger-on, because it's all about Gourav and his amazing book, The Sons of Darkness, which it is truly, truly, truly amazing. And I'm so glad you wrote this, Gourav. So happy to and glad to be here.
Thanks, Mihir.
Yeah. So how much does being a stand-up comic help your law career? Does that help with your humor and that approach? Does that help with?
No, I mean, basically gives me source material for my jokes.
No.
I just go there and, I can't really lash out at the judges. So I just make jokes on them and crack them on the stage. So it's the other way around, not my stand-up comedy doesn't help my law career, but my law career helps my stand-up comedy.
Hey, but also in India, there's a lot of there's this thing also, right? Stand-up comics often get into a lot of trouble because there's always people who are waiting to get offended. So it's like, Gaurav's maybe like, he might be passing along his cards before the show, like, hey, to the other comics, like, in case if you ever need legal help.
Yeah, because stand-up comedy is just not a place of hobby for me. It's also like a LinkedIn conference where I just keep handing out my cards just in case anyone gets into trouble. But in fact, talking about trouble, my book itself is controversial in the sense because it's a reimagining of an ancient tale, which certain right-wing groups, which we know it's across every country right now, might get offended with. But so far, I've been lucky that no one has raised the whole ban Sons of Darkness thing yet. But let's see. I think I wouldn't mind it, to be honest, because from the trends that I've noticed, nothing makes a book more popular than trying to ban it.
Yeah. It's a good way to get attention. But we wanted to ask you about how cultural myths serve as a basis for modern storytelling.
Right. I believe that cultural myths always play a basis for any kind of storytelling, primarily for two reasons. One is that its appeal lies in a recognized form and structure, which the readers recognize. Be it the hero's journey, be it the orphan who turns out to be the chosen one, or the bastard or the lowborn who climbs in the ranks. Uh, I think these kind of tales have a timelessness to them that appeal across millennia and across cultures. So, and the second thing about which I love about myths and cultural myths, for example, is the sense of adventure that they fill you with. I'm trying to imagine myself as this medieval sailor who's been asked to go and explore unknown lands. And I'm thinking, why would I do that? Because I think of the riches, the dragons, the creatures that I might encounter. These creatures who come from the myth tales that have been told to them and passed down generations. So I think mythology has that sense of adventure rooted within it that just appeals to us all the time. I mean, think about the fact that why do we, and we always associate mythology with something which was written thousands and thousands of years in the past. But I believe that even in this century, we're creating our own mythology. Harry Potter is sort of becoming a mythology for the next, generations to come, and that's because of a sense of familiarity and comfort with that sort of world that has been passed down. Same thing with Modern Family. The reason why we constantly keep rewatching it, it's because it's this nostalgia and coziness that it provides us. I think that's why cultural myths come into picture. That they are cozy and they take us on a ride of nostalgia. So once we build our stories on them, we are basically recycling content but adding on it a twist that appeals to the new readers. It's like collides the traditional worlds as well as new modern perspectives. I think that's what's fun about it. Sorry, was that too long a monologue? I'm a lawyer. We tend to give long arguments.
No, that's great. That's what we're hoping for. So no worries there. We want to hear your perspective. So
Yeah, I find it fascinating that apparently the Mahabharata, we see all the Song of Ice and Fire paraphernalia and banners in the background. Gaurav, I haven't read the Mahabharata, but it sounds very much like War of Succession, various Song of Fire ish. George R. R. Martin ish, and is he one of your influences as well? I'm guessing so with all the Stark and Targaryen. That is the background. Is that also one of your influences?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, George R. R. Martin inspired me to start writing because when I read it, I really wanted to read something similar set in an Indian world. And when I didn't find it, and I know this sounds very filmy or cinematic or Bollywood as we call it, but I just came across because in our fifth year in law school we have to read Toni Morrison, and there was this quote by her that you should write the book you want to read if it's
Yes.
not available. And it's a cliche, but that really set me going. I thought, okay, let me just try writing a chapter, and that kind of metamorphosed over a couple of years and became crystallized into a paperback. So yeah, I got lucky there. But definitely, like I really wanted to bring a Game of Thrones inspired world into India, and I wanted to write about Mahabharata, which is an ancient epic tale, because it is so vast. It's the longest epic in the world. It goes into like thousands and thousands of pages, and Brandon Sanderson will look like a tiny Archie comic when it comes to size comparisons. So it's just so I just thought, like, okay, let me try and use some of the basic system which is built on our Vedas. So it's the and chakras and mandlas. And it's really what I kingdom, that kingdom, so that's all very George R. R. Martin inspired.
I think we're getting a little bit of feedback from the microphone.
Okay.
Yeah, you're muted though.
Read.
That's better, but you're muted. There
Yeah.
we go.
Is this better?
Yeah, there we
Yes.
go. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, damn.
Damn microphones. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I hate to do this to you, but can you repeat everything you just said? Because we didn't hear you.
Now you remind me of the judges I argued before. Okay. But I was just talking about like how Game of Thrones inspired me to write. So there's a lot of I have kingdoms. There's a lot of political intrigue that takes place because that's what I wanted to bring down into our into a new story format. Because sometimes the way mythology is passed down, it becomes more like an encyclopedic article. okay, I think the best comparison I can give is actually Fire and Blood.
Yes.
George
Yes.
R. R. Martin
Yes.
wrote that. It's a
Yes.
beautiful story, but it's given as a form of a, like someone is recounting the tale.
Yes.
House of Blood is allowing us to actually deep dive into the character motivations, what really happened with the characters. That is not really there in Fire and Blood. So that's what I was trying to do with Sons of Darkness. Go into the characters that are considered evil, because Mahabharata is also a religious text.
Yes.
It's the idea of good versus evil. So I wanted to go into the psyches of characters that were considered evil and approach that subject from there. I hope you guys could hear me this time.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're good.
So, Gaurav, if you don't mind me asking this, you brought up this really nice, fascinating point of connecting the Mahabharata to George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, because that's the big, that's one of the foundational aspects of epic fantasy. But for now, this is a little bit tricky part, because for a reader like South Asian reader like you, me, we know the Mahabharata. But for somebody like Paul or Steve who are interested in it and who want to learn more, because like you just mentioned, it's the world's longest epic. That's amazing to hear. How did you even consider that to get the Western readers or non-Eastern readers to be familiarized with it or to understand it? How did you kind of plan for it? Because this book is amazing, but it also has aspects of the Mahabharata which Western readers might not know about. So how did you plan for them to kind of understand a text or at least a story which they didn't have access to before?
So I think to draw the best comparison, what I tried to do was what Star Trek's director J.J. Abrams did when he tried to reboot the series and created an alternate dimension, so that new audience, the millennial kids can actually go and watch this and not have the baggage or the legacy of all the show that was there on TV. So that's what I want to do with Sons of Darkness as well. That it's a new world completely with characters taking their own journeys that was not there in the original. So, I mean, it's amazing that Sons of Darkness can inspire other people to actually go and check out the original. Like the way I saw the Star Trek movie and I was interested in seeing what Captain Kirk actually does and who really Spock is and watch the shows. So maybe that's what will inspire. It will inspire people to actually go read the original Mahabharata. And even if it doesn't, it's still a window to Indian mythology, which will hopefully be the exotic new thing for them. So, yeah. Bring in some desi masala and brown curry.
Yeah. I had a couple of comments. Our friend Esme is here. Good morning
Esme.
here. Good afternoon, Esme. Always great. Hope you're feeling better. Anita is here. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming by. And our friend Layla is here. She has a question. Did you feel a responsibility to accurately represent characters from the Mahabharata, or did you creatively adjust their personalities? I just bought the ebook. Looks interesting.
That's a very good question. Let me think. I think I had a lodestone, as in there was this surface level plant, which is a reflection of the character in the Mahabharata. But the roots within it, I decided to carve my own way and go into the character motivations and create something new. The liberties I took with is actually introducing new characters, so that from their eyes we can see the events unfold. So that's something which I took a liberty with. But as for the characters itself, yeah, I definitely took a lot of cinematic liberties. I did. Won't lie.
And it's actually
But I don't know, Mihir can, I think, answer this better as a reader. What did you feel about the characters and the deviations from the original book?
so. This was actually a great point which Gaurav brought up, and it was really fun for me because a person like anybody who's read the Mahabharata knows what happens in the end. Who Krishna is, who Karna is, who Shishupal is, and what they do, and these are all POV characters in the book. But the beauty of his book, Gaurav's book, is that when I was reading them, I was very excited because they were all placed in new situations. Yes, the broad strokes were the same. Where who Krishna is, where he's located, his kingdom of in which kingdom he's located, where Shishupal is, and what his background is. But they were interacting in newer ways, and so it was really fun because I was like, "Is this going to happen, or is this not going to happen?" And I shouldn't reveal it. It's a small spoiler because I wanted to reveal a small spoiler point of how he deviated again from the epic, but never mind, that's a spoiler. So it was a whole lot of fun, and eventually the end twists were happening. There's this minor obscure thing from the Mahabharata which occurred, which even I hadn't forgotten, and I actually had to look it up. Did it actually occur that way? And it actually happens in the book, and that was like a wow moment for me because I was like, how did he even connect that from some small aspect and made it like a big focal point of the story? So yeah. I felt that it was really amazing what you did, Gaurav. And of course, I've repeated this over and over again. Huge fanboy. So
Thank you so much. But Leila, you're right. I did feel like there was a certain responsibility, but I decided to shirk it off like a cloak. I was like, it's okay. I'm just going to deep dive because the original is so beautiful that if someone wants to really read that, I mean, I've written that in my author's note as well. That the original is so amazing. People can go read that. I'm trying to do something which is different and collided with modern sensibilities. For example, one of the biggest changes that I've done is I love, I'm sorry, this is a cliche, but I love badass warrior women. Okay. I mean, I am Leonard Hofstadter there. I love Battlestar Galactica, that sort of a thing. But so I wanted to get the idea of women warriors into the Mahabharata world, which might not be an accurate reflection of the epic as it existed then. While princesses were indeed trained in the royal in sword fighting and archery, etc., etc., but we do not have episodes of them actually engaging in battles. That is something which I've completely deviated from. Gone in the sort of a Malazan way, where women and men are treated equally when it comes to actually fighting in the army. So that's something which I took a liberty with. Yes.
and plus, that's Lady Satyabhama in the cover. She is a major badass warrior in the book, and has a major pivotal moment. I mean, not moment, many moments, which lead to many things all throughout the story and the climax as well. Paul, you definitely got to read this book. I think you're really gonna love it.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm on a temporary book ban because of my wife, because of the credit card's been rung up. But I will. That will be one of the first books, believe me, that I buy. In the new year. Gaurav, I'm just wondering. I mean, there are so many amazing Indian and Eastern fantasy authors. Samit Basu comes to mind. He's a wonderful gentleman. S.A. Chakrabarti, Sweta, Taneja, MS Tripa, all these. Why do you think that there was nothing? There was nothing. You said when you went looking for kind of a retelling of the Mahabharata, you didn't find it. Like, why do you think especially Indian Eastern authors haven't approached that? Is it because the Mahabharata is so daunting, and I guess it's a companion work, the Ramayana. Like, is there a reason why you think it's never been done before? Like, or has it that maybe perhaps I'm not familiar with? Like,
yeah, actually, that's a great question. That always bamboozled me because the concepts of fantasy which exist in our mythology are so great that when I started reading the Wheel of Time, I thought 98% of the magical concepts talk about, say, the male energy, the female energy, the whole concept of Wheel of Time itself was in fact inspired / taken from our Hindu mythology. It's exactly like that. We believe in the age of reincarnation. We have something called Shakti, which is the female energy. The male energy is called Shaivi. So it felt very familiar to me, and I was not able to understand why have Indian authors not really approached this. I mean, it's kind of crazy that I think I am. That's what everyone tells, and that's what my editor claimed, that I'm the first Grimdark author from India, and it's amazing. But it's also bizarre that after so many years, it's 2022, and there's a Grimdark author who's coming up for the first time from this country. I think there are three, and you spoke also about other Indian authors. Now, okay, I'm going to divide into 2-3 things. Okay, first is that we have to draw slight distinction between Indian authors and diaspora authors, because in that sense, in terms of opportunities and the market that they have, the publishers that they have, there's a lot more things at their disposal. In India, publishers have no experience with fantasy. Like, I got lucky that 3 publishers accepted my book, but they wanted to split my book into 3 parts because there is this apparent phobia of word count. And so they were just not like, they really liked the whole idea. They liked the whole idea of the series, but that would mean I have a 5-book plan. That would mean 15 books of like 100,000 words. And they didn't understand the whole concept of epic fantasy. The reason why a book becomes epic fantasy, in my opinion, is that it creates this immersive world experience. And that can only happen when you dedicate some pages to it, right? You can't, and I had to chop off a lot of stuff. So I guess lack of publisher support is definitely one thing why fantasy as a genre has not been explored within Indian territory. So let me start there. And secondly, if I'm trying to get spiritual and metaphysical about it, a lot of our fantasy elements, which are considered fantasy for readers outside India, are considered religious for us. Are considered part of our own mythology. So maybe no one is thinking of wrapping it in form of a story yet. Maybe, I'm not sure. There are a lot of authors who are trying to talk about a mythology. Like, interestingly, fantasy is a genre is somewhat dead in India, but not mythological retellings. Like books like Song of Achilles and Circe, we have a lot of their counterparts in India. You have Palace of Illusions. There's this guy called Amish who has written on the Ramayana series and on Shiva. I don't know if you know Vaishnavi, who wrote a book called Kaikai that's suddenly doing a lot of rounds. So that's again that book. So that's also a reimagining of a character from Ramayana. So there's a lot of mythological retelling that is taking place, but not in the playground of a fantasy novel. I don't know the reason why, to be honest, because there are a lot of fantasy readers. When we do go to bookstores, you will find Game of Thrones, you'll find Brandon Sanderson displayed in major window shelves. But I don't know why there are no Indian authors in them. So it's bizarre, but hopefully that will change. So
And Paul, just to add a little bit more to what you said and what Gaurav said as well, so before, and I'm just talking from my experience, because this was back when I grew up in the 1990s and 2000s in early India. There actually were not even a lot of bookstores. Like, I used to live in the city of Bombay, which is considered one of the big ones. There are very few bookstores, and when even, the thriller and mystery genres where the literary fiction was there, but the fantasy genre was almost non-existent. I can even remember a time before Dan Brown. Now everybody knows who Dan Brown is with the Da Vinci Code. I remember reading his first book, not first, second book, Angels and Demons, and I was really excited because it seemed really fresh back then. But when I asked around for the authors, nobody, or for the bookstores, nobody knew Dan. They would offer me this another thriller writer called Dale Brown. I'm like, no, not him, Dan Brown. And they just gave me clueless looks. Robert Jordan was there. I remember getting his books, but we didn't have a lot of, and surprisingly, we got a lot of books from the UK, but not from the US. So we had the English editions of Terry Brooks, David Gemmell, and R.A. Salvatore, but not a lot of the US authors. And again, to Devora's point, because you mentioned this couple of books, The Palace of Illusions by Chitra B. Duvakaruni. It's technically a recent book in the sense that it's 2007, 2008. There's another author called Kavita Kane who has written a book about Karna's wife, who's also one of the POV characters from Gaurav's book. So I think a lot of authors are, and as Gaurav mentioned, the text, it is the longest epic in the world. So maybe people do get, it is daunting. Imagine, and it's, one way of Mahabharata is described as it's the ocean of stories. There's no central thread. There's multiple threads, and you can look at it from different angles, and it can become like a whole different story. So I think people take a portion of it and they focus on that. Like the Palace of Illusions, it is totally and entirely from Draupadi, the Pandava's wife, her viewpoint and her viewpoint only. Then there is this book called Mrityunjay, which is called The Death Conqueror, which I believe I had a copy over here, but it's from Karna's viewpoint and then a few other minor characters' viewpoint as well. So it's kind of like that. And now, thankfully, I'm hoping, with after Gaurav's success, maybe more and more authors will get an opportunity to write what they wish to, maybe previously did not.
I think all it takes is like a first step, and if it turns out to be doing well, then other publishers look, okay, hey, this model is working out. We can, why is fantasy such a popular genre outside India? Why has nobody tried it here? It's something like that. It's like when people see Facebook really working out and somebody decided to create a social media platform which is similar to Facebook. Maybe, hopefully, it'll bring about that kind of change. So I don't know. Let's see. Hopefully, they will call me father of Indian Grimdark fantasy 50 years down the line. I hope that's what comes about. But yeah, that's the plan. Have you guys read, have any idea of the Indian mythology concepts? So I wanted to actually bring about one interesting point. I hope you guys don't mind. So when Mihir was talking about how there are so many different variations of Mahabharata, India is a land of irony in that case. So Mahabharata was written 3,000 years back, but it was written text. It was actually written in, leaves, parchments, it kept going. Despite it being written, you had 1,000 variations. In fact, there's a very popular quote that there is not, if you take a single state, there will be 100 versions of Mahabharata. Mahabharata is also considered a religious novel in Southeast Asia because of ancient Hindu influence, because we had colonized that area long back. in contrary to that, we have a holy text which is called Rig Veda, which was transmitted through generations by a process called Shruti, which is oral tradition. Like it had to be learned by rote memory, like the way we learn history dates in our exams in school, something like that. But imagine there were like around 3,000 mantras. Mantras are basically small prayers, which you chant to invoke gods. And it was transmitted by telling them you have to memorize this, and each mantra had a specific physical sign to accompany it. And despite it being transmitted through the oral tradition, you would think that, all right, maybe, it will get lost in time or there might be slippage. And India is a huge country. But you take a priest from the North India, South India, West India, East India, they will all recite it in the same manner, in fact, despite passage of thousands of years. So through the oral tradition, they froze the Rig Veda, but despite being written, Mahabharata had like 1,000 different variations. So it's weird, it's interesting, and that's why Mahabharata allows us, even writers right now, to take characters and reimagine them and put them in different worlds. Sorry,
That's
that
very
was a lot of
interesting.
information explosion, but I think that's that was a lot of fun. A lot of people are obsessed over Greek mythology and Homer and everything, but I wish the Britishers spent a lot more time exploring our history so that it would have been actually open to the entire world. But hey, it's never too late.
Yeah. No, that's really great information. You're learning a lot. A couple comments. Original work was written by Sanskrit. Even Tel Versam.
I
Sorry
think
for
it's
getting the
Tamil.
Tamil.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tamil. They're saying Tamil. The M is missing.
Oh, okay, gotcha. And Gochan is here. Good evening. Good morning. Our friend Angie, the bookaholic, is here.
Yeah, gee.
Anita says there are a lot of fantasy stories for kids in other Indian languages, but haven't been much in India. In English, sorry,
Yeah.
in English languages. Original Mahabharata is not written in English.
Yeah. I mean, Sanskrit is considered the mother of all languages.
Yeah.
Okay.
And for the historical context, there was an Indian guy, Kisari Mohan Ganguly, who in the late 19th or late 18th century actually translated the entire text, and his text is actually freely available online. Where the English version is like in the form of verses, because that's how the Sanskrit version was, where it'll talk about it. Each line will begin with "O great warrior, son of this." Like it won't get to the main context until 10 lines just proclaiming the heritage. So it's kind of hard to read that, but there are other authors who have kind of condensed that into a much more readable version, if anybody's interested.
Oh, that's really interesting. Angie said, I would love to see completely new and fresh fantasy world built, but not based on our mythology. There are many non-English authors who have shown their brilliance. English was introduced to India after 1696. Mahabharata happened around 2500 BC. And Esme has read my mind. No worries about the info dump. I'm loving this and learning a lot.
Thanks.
Spectre, good morning. And Angie, yes, keep them coming. Love the info dump. And
I think it's a lot more appreciated on YouTube videos rather than in books.
Yeah. And Taylor's here. I'm
hey,
good that I
Taylor.
can't be there on video at the moment, but I'm obsessed with mythologies, and I love the particular beauty that comes from spoken word stories. They take on a life of their own.
Oh yeah, and another fun fact about this, since Taylor mentioned this, like the Mahabharata, like Gaurav mentioned, has spread, to Southeast Asia as well. So in Indonesia, if you go there, they have, all the Mahabharata characters, Arjuna, Krishna, Garuda, they are there as well. So if you look at, the main airline of the Indonesia, it's called Air Garuda. They have lots of these beautiful statues and stuff like that as well. So yeah, and they even have their own version of the Mahabharata, like where there's minute differences here and there of how. Again, the main story broadly is the same, but there's small differences. Like they'll have Bhim's wife who played a major influence, but not so in the Indian version and stuff like that. So it's really fun to kind of keep on discovering them.
Yeah, it's just for me as a reader, such a huge untapped, limitless potential, right? With Indian and Eastern fantasy, some of the best books I've read all year. Sierra Frost, thanks to Steve, he got me onto to Obsidian Awakening. Please read that book. Beautiful, Beautiful book, Middle Eastern inspired again. Uh, of course, Gaurav, you did a great live with Zanil Akhtar, amazing author, wonderful human being, and his Gunmetal Gods. Again, one of my favorite. His whole series now become one of my favorite series. Like, it's such a huge, again, it's untapped potential. It's limitless. Like, and I feel like it's the future going forward. Um, seeing more diverse works of fantasy from not just medieval European inspired, but from all over the world. And I think that's the future of fantasy, right? And as more and more authors such as yourself emerge, it's just going to add such a lushness to to our reading, which I'm just thoroughly enjoying. I'm just loving. Almost like a renaissance in fantasy.
That's beautifully put, because now that you put it, I'm trying to think of English readers in US and UK, like the Spanish Empire, who's discovering the exoticness of the Indian market, and they are sending Vasco da Gama to find the routes to that place. So I guess in that sense, fantasy itself is moving towards a non-European magic systems and worlds. If you look at the success of Poppy War, I think that's like a shining example of how the world is thirsting for a non-European inspired fantasy series, because that's something new and something different. So yeah, hopefully that fantasy in that sense will become a lot more inclusive and diverse as this proceeds.
And you had mentioned earlier about about some books being like on a ban list, or was that part of the reason why we haven't seen more darker fantasy stories from India, from that part of the world? Does that contribute to maybe the lack of content we're getting there that hope to see more of?
I would not go that far yet, because this trend of banning, or being very sensitive to any kind of liberties taken with literature, is something which started very recently, like in the last 5-6 years. So I wouldn't credit that to grimdark fantasy books not coming out. In fact, there are a lot of normal fiction works which are very dark and very gritty, and there's a lot of violence in them. But no one's really explored the whole idea of magic system yet. I think that was something which was missing. Like, even if we take the example of the books which Mihir cited, Palace of Illusions by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, that retold the Mahabharata in perspective. But again, there was no that concept of magic system involved. You spoke about S.H. Chakrabarti. She's an Indian author, but the fantasy that she dealt with was Middle Eastern inspired, not Indian. So in that sense, I think that's something which was missing for some reason. I haven't had a chance to read R.R. Virdi's first binding yet, but I've heard that also is very interesting. I do not know if it is an Indian magic system or not, but yeah. So yeah, but I think that's also something which is, I'm sorry, I'm kind of deviating, and this is a conversation, so I'm just going to I talk about the first thing which we spoke about, how certain books are becoming myths for the next generations. Like, in the sense, Game of Thrones is sort of a mythology for me, who I am now reinterpreting and putting it in the Mahabharatan world. And that just reminded me of first binding, because I hope this is not controversial, but the Name of the Wind is so popular, and it is a mythology of its own. And first binding, in that sense, is a sort of interesting using of those kind of techniques and trying to tell a new story. Because I think when Steve told me about the topic, I started, okay, let me just read about it. And I discovered somebody had made a chart about mythological influences, and it said that it has to have three things. One, that it needs to be based on some ancient mythology stuff. Like Harry Potter, for example, is based on Arthurian legend of this chosen one who comes to pick up stuff. In that sense, Sons of Darkness is built on Hindu legends. And then there is something that it needs to be a fan fiction of a kind of an existing mythological trend. Sons of Darkness can be a fan fiction of Mahabharata, and in that sense, even Game of Thrones. And in that sense, the first binding can be a fan fiction. Please, Virdi, do not kill me for this, but of the Name of the Wind. And a beautiful one, and I love reading it because it again brings that sense of familiarity that I love the first story, and I love what he's doing with this. Patrick Leo said the same thing on his YouTube channel, that there are a lot of comparisons drawn between Name of the Wind and the first binding, and he agrees with all of them, but it was still such a fresh story that he loved the read. So I think that's kind of interesting about mythology just not being something which is very ancient, but also modern mythologies. something which I just thought of. Yeah.
Wordy just does a little bit different thing. Like, while he utilizes like the settings, like his magic system is not like a Hindu or based on Hindu mythology. The settings of his book are based on South Asia, but the magic system is kind of like a little bit different. It's like a mental system. Like, the characters have to form these bindings in their minds and then kind of speak it, and then the magic happens. It's kind of like that. So it is a pretty cool system, and I'm excited actually. And honestly, I feel this is a better book than Name of the Wind. Like,
Yeah.
this book is truly amazing and has, like Gaurav mentioned, some similarities, but I feel like that's like, if that's like the hero's journey, right? Like, and it's like between, if you compare Star Wars and Aragon, they're kind of similar because they both follow the whole hero's journey, but they're not technically, you can't call them
Yeah.
rip-off, so it's kind of like that.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. I mean, that's why I think Tor is really pushing for it, because they must have seen the value in that. I'm really looking forward to read this, especially because when you go on Amazon, it always says people have bought Sons of Darkness and First Binding together. There's always a plus sign. So I'm really happy with that team up. So I'm really looking forward to that. I mean, I think for similar reasons, even my book has been comped with the First Law series. I think that was one of the major. I think someone asked me right now that, I think Leila asked that, was there any responsibility when it comes to changing the characters from our ancient mythology? And this is something which is very interesting and slightly controversial again. There's a character called Shakuni in the original Mahabharata who limps, who's a cripple. Okay. And he is this devious guy in the original epic who wants to bring down the empire. I have a similar character in my book as well. Okay. And suddenly I have this guilty pleasure / torment of sometimes going and just checking out the Goodreads reviews. Can't help it. I'm just a human being at the end of the day. And sometimes I see that comparisons, which they say that it's based on that. And I'm like, that's not true. I mean, of course, since Glotka is such a beautiful character that it has become part of this modern mythology, people don't know about Shakuni, right? But people think that Shakuni is completely based on Glotka. But the journeys are completely different. Both Patrick and Mihir have said that in the review. But I get I get it. I understand. But now, I mean, everyone's been watching the House of Dragon. That guy called Laris, he's also a guy who limps and he's devious. So I'm sure there are going to be comparisons that is picked up from Glotka as well. So, I mean, that's the part of, I think, power of modern mythology that I was talking about. And hopefully that when they get through the pages, they'll see that they take different journeys. I'm sure it echoes as well, because I did tell Mihir and Patrick that I'm sure in my mind when I'm talking about this guy who's a cripple and who's really devious, I'm sure Glotka entered my mind because that is such a memorable character. But but there is this other character who was written 4,000 years before Glotka was born. So, yeah.
And I think that's why perhaps Taylor, I didn't have a chance to finish watching it before the broadcast, but Taylor from Maybe to their pages, our other wonderful co-hosts who unfortunately couldn't join us live, she just made a fascinating video about reading fantasy and diversity in fantasy, and about the importance in terms of I don't want to misquote. A lot of it was about one of the impetuses to do that was simply about learning. And so if you didn't realize that, the Mahabharata was one of the most ancient, written texts anywhere, and that it was made thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, you might, you might think, okay, obviously, this particular book is, this particular character is based on this book, but no, the Mahabharata far precedes this, right? So, I think it's just all part of our education, having all of these, like I said, these rich cultural experiences with reading now and reading all these writers from all over the world, that it's educating us in terms of, did you realize that this was out there, that this is just as ancient as the Iliad or the Odyssey, or do you know what I mean? Like, a lot of people aren't aware, right? And I think it's important in our education as people who love literature to experience this. So thanks to writers like Gourav, this is what it's doing. We're learning, we're educating ourselves. So
Thanks. I mean, I think as authors, our duty is to educate, entertain, and enchant. So I think hopefully that works. Or what I'm going to do is, when this video does go up, I'll carve out that section where I'm talking about this and just make a TikTok or a reel about it. Send it out to the internet sphere that, hey, this is there.
And Esme agrees. This fits nicely with Taylor's latest video about reading diversely. Yes, check that out, everyone.
It was a very nice video. Yeah.
Partha says Southeast Asia also worships characters of I'm going to mispronounce that. I'm sorry. Ramayana.
Yeah,
Ramayana.
Ramayana.
Okay, good. Which is older than the Mother Heart.
Yes.
Sorry, I know I'm butchering all the words here. Apologies. Angie says, considering the twist that you have given the MB characters, did you fear backlash from a particular section of Indian readers?
Oh, absolutely. My dad was petrified. He's like, listen, you will have to get security. We don't have that kind of money or influence in the society. And he was so worried when the book is going on. He told me to use a pseudonym. Don't use your real name, or at least don't use the surname. Don't use my name. So he was very worried. I'm like, it's okay. Let's see how it'll go out. And then so far, the reviews and reception have been very kind, even from the right wing community. So that's something which is very special, and he's happy that I'm not going to be pelted with stones on the street. So yeah.
That is a real possibility in India. He's not joking. I'm not.
you're not kidding.
Yeah,
Wow, okay.
that is not a figure of speech. That is a real possibility in India that you can get pelted with stones, or your house can get pelted with stones, because the Indian public, like their love, it's on a different angle. Like they'll if they love you, the Indian public will take you to their hearts will be filled of it. And the alternate is true. The opposite of love can also happen. When they dislike you, they'll make it known in really, really horrible ways. So yeah,
And religion is always a tricky subject, and but so far they have been really kind, so that's good. Because there's this very famous Harvard graduate. I mean, she's a big figure of authority on Hindus. Her name is Wendy Doniger. She's an author based in US, and she wrote a book called On Hinduism, which is a beautiful book, and it was published by Penguin. But because of pressure, they pulped every single copy like 3 years back. Yeah. And that book has been in the market for the last 15 years. So I have a copy of it. But as I told you, in the last 4 or 5 years, the backlash against anything which they don't think is in consonance with our idea of religion should exist. So, cancel culture and all that. So, yeah.
Wow.
What is it? So when it comes to depicting deities, religious figures, what is it what is a writer? I know for myself as a writer, some of some of my favorite books I've read. Sir, you mentioned Circe, wonderful book, by Madeline Miller. What is it in the treatise of how an author writes deities, religious figures? There's one of the big series on my TBR that I have to, The Immortals of Meluva, which again we're talking about Hindu, dealing with one of the most famous Hindu gods, Shiva. What is it about how an author treats their writing, their depiction of religious figures? What can an author do to respect people's beliefs, how they idolize that particular figure, but yet maintain that realism, true to their own vision of what they interpret that figure to be? What do you think an author can do to keep true to their vision, treat that understanding how many people look to that figure as a deity, and respecting that? What can an author do in that?
All right. So I'll answer the question in 3 parts. So I'm going to start with a bit of an info dump. I hope that's okay. So the Indian gods, just to give a 1-minute crash course, we had a pantheon which kind of permeated into the Greek culture. Like every god we have in our pantheon which existed back then has a corollary in the Greek pantheon. Like the Greek pantheon has Zeus, we have Indra. They both were very lascivious people, lecherous gods who went after women. Indra was exactly the same. And similarly, we have because around that time, gods were always created around elements of nature, thunder, lightning, fire, sun, moon, etc., etc. We had a very similar concept. But over the years, the pantheon in India it kind of relegated to a secondary status. And the concept of 3 main gods came into picture. One is Shiva, who's called the destroyer. One is Vishnu, who's called the preserver, and one is Brahma, the creator. So you have the creator, the preserver, and these three are still worshipped a lot right now. The In a way, the old pantheon, the Greek pantheon, a corollary in India, has been forgotten, which allowed me to like wreak havoc with their interpretation in my book because hey, we are forgotten. So that kind of allowed me. Talking about what an author can do to respect. One thing is that, I mean, as an author, I just wrote for myself. I just want to read what I write. I really wasn't thinking from the perspective of how readers will receive it, as long as I was having fun with it. When I started proofreading it, all I wanted to ensure was that I am not being insensitive to something which needs protection in society, like a discriminated class. Because one thing which I've done in my book, so India had a very like the UK world, I mean the European world has a feudal system, right? Our system, which we had and US had racism, right? India had something which is called the caste system. Our society was divided into 4 castes. And the idea initially was novel that whichever profession you choose, you belong to that caste. But then over the years, the priests who used to be from the highest echelon of that caste made it a rigid system. And it was like wherever you're born, you cannot change your profession. And the lowest caste it was really discriminated and really subjugated. So I didn't want to. So that's why I've changed the name of the castes in my book. Like Brahmins have become Namins. Kshatriyas have become Sharjas. So, like, Kshatriyas were the warrior class. The Brahmins were the priestly class. So I've changed their names just so that I can imagine how for the subjugated community, which has been subjugated over thousands of years, it could be a sensitive thing. Like Karna, who's a major character in the book and who Mihir and Patrick they love, is actually a low-born, who's considered from the lowest character, and he's a hero. There's a hero's journey for him as well. But I still did not want to, because I know the historical baggage that exists, and as personally, I did not want to use the actual term, the denigatory term, which was used. So I changed the name. So these were the things which I did to ensure that, like, if I were that person, I wouldn't be hurt. But when it comes to deities, yeah, I think I went all out. I was like, hey, I'm just enjoying myself. So, in fact, there's one thing funny which I did, and this was sort of an Easter egg. So, one of the gods who's introduced at the starting, his name is Thorin Drazius. Okay, it's Thorin space Drazius. And I told Mihir a lot later on that it's actually, if you put the words together, it's Thor, Indra, and Zeus, their names amalgamation, who are the god of thunder in Norse, Greek, and Hindu mythology, respectively. So all the devas are sort of named in this wacko fashion.
And also, like just to add to your Gaurav's point, PL, like from a reader perspective, because I'm not an author, so I cannot speak for that perspective. But like from a reader perspective, like you mentioned, Amish Tripathi, the book, what he has done is like, and in India, the one thing which I want to highlight is that in Hindu mythology, it's unlike Abrahamic mythology where you cannot depict gods. There is nothing like that. There is no statuette. There is no compulsion that you cannot depict gods. You cannot. The only thing the Indian readers, viewers, or the Indian public expects is that you treat them with a modicum of respect. You can have like a comedic show, that is okay, but you cannot disrespect them. So which is why, and I'll bring a specific example. I don't know if you all read Dan Simmons. He has written a book, which was set in Calcutta, the city, and it's kind of like a horror book, and in which he's kind of shown Kali, which is a goddess who's shown to be who's a little bit of a I don't want to say a warrior goddess, but she has an angry side to her. And the eastern parts of India, they really respect the goddess Kali. It's like a big thing. But Dan Simmons, the way he's written the book, again, totally speaking from a person who's read it, like when I can read it, I understood what he was going with. But as an Indian, when you read it, it can be a little bit insulting the way he twists the myth of Kali or the goddess Kali into and again, not to appear spoilers, it's a very weird thing what he does over there. And I can easily see people taking offense at that, like, how dare you do that? But at the same point, to Gaurav's book and to Amish Tripathi's book or to, Chitra B. Divakarani's book, they've approached it as people who then became gods or who then became legends, but then they didn't denigrate those personalities in any way, so as to speak. Even if Gaurav writes about these gods, and this is not a spoiler, the gods which he writes, they're larger than life, they're a little bit mean, and they're a little bit, just to say, inhumane, because they are they're not human after all. but that is in line with what we have seen as a reader, or what we have experienced as, from a mythological perspective, and that's okay. That's not offensive. Of course, if anybody takes offense, that's a whole different story, and I don't think they're right, but that's not offensive. What Dan Simmons did in that book, it was a little bit offensive. Again, I'm not advocating banning his book or book burning anything. I'm just giving an example of what can be offensive to a reader, especially from that, who comes from that area of the world. And another examples of books which are not offensive because they do it in the right way.
I mean, sorry, I'll just build on that point again. Like there are other books, but I'm not going to take names, but in the sense, I think it all story comes down to the fact that if it is done organically, feels like a part of the story, and it's done, and you're writing just for yourself rather than to prove a point, it will read very well. Because there are books which have come out, again, retellings and reimaginings of our ancient tales. See, for example, I wanted to have badass warrior women, right? Because I bring about sort of a feminist thing, which is great. I'm self-praising myself. Fuck narcissism. Okay, but there are some authors where the feminism became so forced that they turned very pivotal characters anti-women, which they weren't. So then that kind of turns a little offensive to readers who have not seen that ever happen. For example, okay, let me try and give an example from the Greek mythology perspective. If someone writes a book where they say that Zeus took consent from every woman, that will not be believable to anybody, and that will people will have issue with that because that's not correct. So that's wrong. But so that's what I wanted to show, that maybe I think the best way to respect readers is to, when you're relying on source material, and even if it's slightly changing it, if you're doing it organically and you're not trying to force feed an opinion, I think the readers understand that.
Had a couple of comments here. Layla says, I agree, our modern books and shows are our myths. And her friend Joanna's here. Late to this chat, I really enjoyed the book. Finished a week ago and still thinking about it.
Thanks, Joanna.
And Layla says, yes, this reminds me of Edris Sabanowski's The Witcher. He has based his scenes and chapters on European folk tales, but the characters are different. Mm-hmm. They're symbolic of the theme, but different. Was The Witcher an influence for you, Gourav?
I unfortunately haven't had a chance to read the books. I just watched the show, but I really want to have a Henry Cavill-like character in the book. And that's something which I really want. But actually, that's an interesting point because honestly, like if I read whatever fantasy books I've read, when you ask me what is the importance of cultural myths, I think one of the biggest importance that it has had is in giving all the monsters and creatures in our book.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, apart from Malazan, I don't think I've read books which have completely original monsters in that sense. Because I've read a lot of books like, there are dragons, which obviously come from our past. You have the Gorgons. I mean, take any creature which was mentioned in the Kings of the Wild, because, that's like a fun book on different kind of creatures from every kind of mythology. And all those characters are based in mythology and are part of different books. But very few books actually come out with completely new characters. Even Harry Potter universe, J.K. Rowling took a lot of effort in going around different cultures and having those characters from their mythology. Like if you look at the Forbidden Beasts movie, so in that, when they go to America, the Thunderbird, which comes, it's based on their Native American mythology. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. I think that's one of the biggest contributions to mythology, to modern fantasy, is their zoo.
Their zoo. A special shout out to Dirk Ashton in his Paternus trilogy. He does the same thing. Like, he has written a story which combines all the world's mythologies and all the world's monsters as well. And the monsters are the main characters in his books too. So if anybody has ever read those are really fantastic.
Yeah. Partha says, I recommend everyone to watch the English movie The Mahabharata by Peter Brooks in the late 1980s. You will enjoy it. We'll have to go check that out.
Unpopular opinion: don't watch that movie. No. This is going to be an unpopular opinion. It's a very, I don't even know what to call it. It's not a movie in the classical sense of like how people are expecting it. It's more like a stage show which is then shot in cinema, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Give it a shot and then see what it would. Do not expect an accurate rendition of the original Mahabharata epic, or because it won't excite you about the Mahabharata. Let me put it this way.
I love how Mihir is just controlling himself from not using undiplomatic words. Well, I think the best thing to do is just wait and petition HBO to turn Sons of Darkness into a series.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah,
Yes.
there you go. Taylor says, if you think about it, pretty much all character archetypes and stories have been done at this point. We've been telling stories for too long, and to not be repeating ourselves a bit.
I completely agree.
It's all about throwing a fresh and inventive spin on. Well, I read about Atlantis. I mean, how many times has Atlantis been done, retold, reimagined? There's nothing wrong with sometimes in our pursuit of trying to be innovative and original, we forget that, as Taylor said, it's all been done before. We're just putting our spin on it, right? And there's nothing wrong with that.
I think that's why Grimdark as a genre has become popular, because it is doing the same thing but from a different camera lens, so as to speak. So I think that's the reason why it's become so popular. Or that's why I love reading it. So
Yeah.
And I have to ask, I know this question, it's a question we always ask whenever we have a Grimdark author or a reader on, but what does the term Grimdark mean to you? Because everyone seems to have a different opinion on it.
Okay, I will confess I copied this from Wikipedia because I read somewhere, but I think it's anti-Tolkien. I think that's the shortest summary of it. It's just that because I think everyone knows in their own hearts that nobody is divided into good and evil. Everyone is just responding to the choices, and everyone is a hero in their own story or a villain in their own story. So I think that's what Grimdark really does, is that it just writes great characters and makes them respond to choices. Whether they're evil or not is so ambiguous that it's not a line drawn in the sand. And I think that's what makes it so realistic. So yeah, that's what Grimdark is for me. And of course, they do not shy away from depiction of violence, because it is what is real. At this point, I'm just going to bring about this interesting, very bizarre fact that if you go and check on Goodreads the reviews for a Game of Thrones, the top 3 reviews are 1-star ratings, because they speak about why does it have to resort to violence and so on. And the 4th most liked review is of Mark Lawrence, who says, I can't believe people are rating it 1 and that is so popular. And the reason is because of gratuitous display of violence and incest and things that happen. And those reviewers had a problem saying that, yes, because George R. R. Martin has, when he has defended these scenes, he has said, because that's what used to happen then. When we create fantasy, there's a magical element, yes, but it's always rooted in reality. And it's a depiction of the times then. But these guys said that, since you're a writer, you have the liberty to not show these scenes, etc., etc. Of course, it's their choice, it's their prerogative. But I think that's what Grimdark does. It does not shy away from the reality. And I think that's what is appealing to a lot of readers these days. But I'm sure the cycle turns, I think I wrote this in some article because technically Troy is Grimdark. The Iliad is Grimdark. Mahabharata is very Grimdark. And even if you speak about Ovid or Dante's Inferno, they're all very Grimdark books. And that was the genre then, Black Plague and etc., etc. After Black Plague, you started having really noble kind of books like the Narnias, very moralistic lions, so as to speak. And I think the cycle, like the wheel of time, will keep turning. Grimdark will become the trend, and then people will start inching towards books where they just want a cozy fantasy where a hero is right. And I don't know. That's my opinion, I think.
Yeah, that was very succinctly said. Anti-Tolkien. I totally concur. Gaurav, I wrote a piece in Story Digider, a great writer influencer. He asked me to write a guest blog, and that's what I essentially said about Grimdark, that it was a backlash to Tolkien and the more sanitized, high epic, the hero's good looking, perfect, I think the popularity of Grimdark, and Steve did an amazing video on what is Grimdark. I recommend you all to check it out if you haven't read it. I think, as you just pointed out, Gaurav, we've almost already seen the pendulum swing back. the popularity of Travis Baldry and Legends and Lattes and all these cozy fantasies coming out because, oh my gosh, I've read enough dark stuff now. I'm traumatized. I can't read anymore. I have to go read something, where nobody dies and everything's, everything's lovely. But we can have all of those. They can coexist, right? We can have cozy fantasy, love it. We can love grimdark and gritty, morally gray, ambiguous characters, and we can have, more high epic, more if you want to call it sanitized, fantasy, which doesn't perhaps depict the realism and the grittiness of the darkness. It's all great literature, right? We can have them all, and I think that's, we have to realize that and appreciate all of them for their strengths and the things that they bring to the table. And I think as a reader, everyone's taste is unique, and we don't have to like everything, but we can potentially like a lot of different things, right? Which is,
you can watch a serial killer movie and then go to watch The Secret World of Pets.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Also, hashtag Malasan.
I was wondering where you're going to mention fear.
I'm outnumbered on this panel.
See,
I know that.
I did just because of you, because I love you. I didn't mention it, but I actually think Gourav brought up Balazar first, so blame him.
Wait, I don't know the context behind this.
So, amidst this panel, Gaurav, Steve, Paul, and you're all people who love Malazan. I'm the only person who's read Malazan's first 5 books and then decided it was not for me. I never recommend Malazan to anybody just because it's not for me.
Yeah, a bit of a running joke there about I'm always teasing here about Malazan. So.
I've also just read 6 books, or 5 books rather, and I don't know. I mean, Udinas, there's a character called Udinas. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the way Steven Erikson wanted, and he is such a crybaby. I'm at that place. I'm like, why does he keep crying all the time? But Philip Chase then I think said something as to why that character is so important, and in fact, Steven Erikson loves that character, and it's amazing. That's what I was trying to show, that there's so many reader perspectives that exist. And I think Malazan is just a beautiful world. But I'm going to confess again that when I read the first book, Gardens of the Moon, I had to wiki the magic system because I was not understanding what's happening. And then there was this nice thing on the Warrens, and I understood what Tata Sale was trying to do. And yeah, it was fun.
We did pretty good. I really enjoyed reading the book. Very interesting. Once you start reading, you cannot stop yourself from reading it up to the last page. I will recommend others to read.
Looking at all the surnames, I think my dad has just broadcasted it to all his friends. It's my entire great lineage. So every time I see the surname, I'm like, could you at least change the surname? That's the Indian family system.
Bad as Red is here. Good morning. It is early.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Anita says, I'm only 150 pages into the book. Haven't met Karma yet. He is my favorite character from the Mahabharata, so I'm excited to see how Gourav portrayed him.
Anita, you're going to love him. He is Gaurav has written it exactly the way Karna was in the original epic, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, that's the one character I did not take any liberties with, because the original character itself is so bloody amazing. So, yeah.
Yeah, if you love anti-heroes, or if you love people, conflicted heroes, or if you love heroes who have to, who strive to be heroic in spite of the world and everything being against him, that's Karna in a literal nutshell. So if you all like,
he's my Jon Snow,
but much cooler than Jon Snow as well.
Mihir, I'm sorry, Steve.
No,
Before the book was published, I actually made this epic rap battle video between Jon Snow versus Karna, and called it the Battle of the Bastards.
I have seen that.
sorry, Steve.
That's a great idea.
I'm going to see that.
You're going to look at that now.
No, please don't. Then you will not read my book. No, please don't.
I also saw Bashima's name in the glossary. Another favorite character of mine. Can't wait to continue. And Karma is my favorite too. We nailed it. Layla says, regarding the film, the Mahabharata, it is probably like so many other film adaptations. They are rarely as good as the original, but it can inspire us to read the literature.
I mean,
Brad Pitt's Troy did that for me though, for definitely Greek mythology, because that movie. I mean, I know that a lot of people had a problem with that movie because they completely eliminated the idea of gods and the political intrigue. But he was so cool as
Yeah,
Achilles
yeah.
that just I got introduced to Circe's Song of Achilles and then Stephen Fry's Mythos series, and it was just an endless pool. It was amazing. I completely agree with you, Leila.
Joanna says, I loved Karma's introduction. He's a fantastic character.
Thanks, Joanna.
Our friend Bo is here. I think cozy fantasy is popular right now because of the pandemic. Was like living in Grimdark story during the thick of it. Yeah. What does everyone think about that? Is that part of why cozy fantasy and lighter stories are kind of gaining popularity now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I believe that, we weren't ready for the slice of reality that we received during the pandemic. And because for most of us, we've never lived through a pandemic, people who had been born, approximately 30 to 40 years before. So people in their night, they understand what that looks like, and the horrors of it. We were the first, of this generation. I talk about people born sometime around 1970 and later. So I feel that, as much as, again, the trend, we talked about Grimdark and why people were looking to read Grimdark as opposed to, the more, idealized heroic fantasy, I think at the same time, in the midst of loving Grimdark, then we had our own real Grimdark reality confront us. And that was a bit too much. And then we started saying, okay, well, you know what, maybe, with everything that's going on right now, my sick parents and worrying about, my elderly parents in a nursing home, are they going to get COVID? My child, cooped up, not being able to go to school, and, I have to work from home, and all these other things going on. I think, we definitely may have turned to, something a bit lighter, more uplifting fare. And it's not that Grimdark is without hope. I certainly don't feel that Grimdark books there's an absence or a dearth of hope. Absolutely. A lot of Grimdark books definitely have a vein of hope shining through them, right? It's just that to get there, you have to go through a lot of grime, so,
finest lotuses are found in the worst lakes. So it's something like that. They always grow in mud. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Terry Pratchett really helped me through the pandemic. I mean, his books are so light and cozy. I really want to read Travis Baldry's
Legends Nowadays.
Legend. The original cover was beautiful. The two, orcs
The
standing.
ogre, yeah. To draw a historic parallel, J.R.R. Tolkien went through the First World War and the Second World War when he started writing The Lord of the Rings. So, it's kind of funny that, after seeing the horrors of the war, he wrote this ultra-heroic, traditionalist fantasy. And right now, I think, and to Paul's point, I think you can only read Grimdark when things are going right in your world. When things are going right in your world, when you're in a good mental space, you can face the horrors of the book. But when things are absolutely horrendous around you, you don't want to be surrounded by, you don't want to dive into a book where horrible things are happening on the page, which is why I think cozy fantasy is coming up even more right now, because the writers who perhaps, were just in horrible minds, because they want to go set up they want to write in worlds which at least offer some semblance of peace or semblance of like honor or dignity, which is why I think now we'll have a lot more cozy fantasy. Did you all see this book called The Book of Zog by Alec Hudson? It's a Lovecraftian cozy fantasy. And it works. It's like truly the main character is a old one, but it's not old. It's a new old one. And his name is Zogrus. And he's led into this universe. And it's actually a cozy fantasy, and it works really nicely. So if you haven't read it, check it out. This is the absolute limits of cozy fantasy when you have a Lovecraftian old one as the main character, and it's cozy fantasy.
That's a good comp. But Mir, on that note, when the pandemic did start and was on its peak, if you notice, at least on my Instagram suggestions and Amazon suggestions, pandemic-related books on plague, they became very popular as well. Like World War Z suddenly hit the charts again, and the movie was the very bad adaptation of the book, but it became very popular again. So I guess there are so many kinds of readers, as Stuart so beautifully put, that it's a huge space where we all coexist. Because while I definitely went for Terry Pratchett during the pandemic, a lot of people decided to read about a zombie plague while in the middle of a plague. So it's amazing. I think, it's interesting.
That's really interesting. Joanna says, I love Malazan, but I don't recommend it to everyone.
Joanna, I love your videos with Philip and Fantasy Dragon Critic. Sorry, I think I'm getting the Critical Dragon.
AP
Quick-
Canavan.
AP Canavan, yeah, wonderful. Yes,
Yeah,
he's
he's great.
amazing. He's amazing. Yeah. So is Joanna. Joanna is wonderful. He's wonderful.
And Philip has this traditional, that look which he carries, right, with the blazer and a
That
t-shirt.
professor.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
distinguished
done the
professor.
Robert Langdon thing from Dan Brown, I think.
Mm-hmm. The only thing missing
Yeah.
is like a Mickey Mouse watch.
Yeah. Jeremiah says, Krishna was the first superhero.
I think Ram was the first superhero.
Or Ravan, if you really want to twist it up.
Taylor says, a bit of a different topic, but Gourav's cover absolutely slaps, and I was wondering how he snagged that fantastic art.
Oh, this is a fun story. So, okay, so basically my publisher is very small and very indie. Their budget was almost next to nothing for the cover. But I mean, I know there's a cliche quote which says that we don't judge a book by its cover, which is fair. But a good cover is a window into a book, because especially when you have such beautiful, amazing books everywhere, it really helps.
Yeah, the covers. Boss cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Attention. So I really want, and at that point of time, interestingly, I saw S.A. Chakraborty's book, because that time I was trying to look for Indian fantasy authors, and I came across S.A. Chakraborty, and I really loved her book covers. And from there, I researched a lot into who's designed it, and I found Michaela, and luckily she had gone freelance around that point of time. So I reached out to her, and she was so kind to take this project on, and I'm glad that cover turned out to be what it is. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
And it's so pretty. At some point in time, how books have to put reviews on the front page. Like almost every book has that. You have a review in the front.
Mm-hmm.
I can't disturb this cover because it is so perfect. I do not know where to put it. I think I'll have to take out my own name to put my review somewhere. It's beautiful. I keep obsessing over it and trying to take Instagramish pictures for the book. So it's a lot of fun.
Hey, maybe a hardcover special edition with a different cover there might be some space over there. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Fingers
I think
crossed.
that's where it's different. I think I don't know if you guys know. Mihir knows this, that in India, hardbacks is rare. If you sell 1 million copies, that's when the publisher decides to go for a hardcover, which is very different outside. Like in the sense, everyone goes for hardcover first, and maybe then you have paperbacks on the side. So I'm hoping that Sons of Darkness manages to reach a place where it's available in hardback as well. In fact, a lot of the readers, there was a reader from Slovenia, there's someone from US who reached out to me personally and asked me if I can courier them the book from India because they wanted the colored edition, and I was very happy to do that. And that was fun.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And Anita is a fan of Legends and Lattes. Taylor says, bad pandemic romances really took off, for better or worse. Kissing the coronavirus was a big one.
Yeah. I think there was a book title called Love in the Time of Corona. Which was like a rip of Love in the Time of Cholera.
Cholera.
So,
Kudos to the author for thinking of that and being the first one to put it out.
absolutely.
Capitalize, I guess. Jeremiah says, I feel the same about Baker, like his books, but I don't know many people who would like it, so I don't recommend it.
I love Baker. Yeah, I really like his stuff.
But would you say, Paul, that there's almost no hope in Baker or Backer's books, right? It's one of the bleakest books out there. Literally one of the bleakest books out there. And I'm saying this as a person who likes Baker. I'm not he's truly, what he has done is fantastic, but his books are hard on the brain as well. You can only I don't think you can read them back to back to back. They make my brain hurt.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree, Mihir. I loved it. I've only read the first book, but I found it extremely dark. As not quite as complex to understand initially as Malazan. And initially I liked the first book better than I did Gardens of the Moon. So series wise, but I've read more of Erickson now, so I'm really getting into it. But extremely nihilistic, very, very brutally dark. Steve, you've read I took a pause on purpose from as much as I loved it. I like Mihir, like you. I loved the first book, but I actually said, "Oh, you know what? I'll come back to that, and I'll have to take breaks between."
No, I think that's why now we have subgenres even of the Grimdark world. Like you have bleak Grimdark, There's something which I wrote, which I think I saw it in Patrick's review. It's called Filthy Grimdark, which is
Yeah.
Michael Fletcher's first book, but I'm reading. Like, this man is so demented, but he's a sweet guy. I'm like, don't want to be trapped in the same room as you ever. Like, the things you can conjure up with. And my book is epic grimdark, and there's just so many different kinds of grimdark also that's coming into picture. So that's fun.
Yeah, you're right, Gaurav. There's all these different subgenres within. People refer to my books as moral grimdark because of what the topics I delve into: racism, colonialism, homophobia, things like that. But when we look at books that are bleak, I think the one thing that we have to realize too is that a lot of times we read books that are bleak because there's a sense of catharsis. Sometimes we're just like, oh my gosh, well, I thought what I was going through was bad. Well, what this character is going through is much worse. Or it helps us understand some of our own trauma because we see some of these similar experiences that these fictional characters have gone through that we can relate to. And there's all kinds of reasons why we really cling to grimdark. But I do love a book that has compelling themes, right? And grimdark typically explores compelling themes. And it's hard to hook me as a reader unless you're discussing issues that really grab me. So, and that's why I'm so looking forward to your book, Gaurav, that I know I can just see it's going to grab me. But one question I did have for you quickly, Gaurav, how have you felt about all this initial success? Like, your book is everywhere. Everyone wants to buy it. It's really blown up. Like, how are you feeling about the initial success that you've enjoyed so far?
I think I feel like Cinderella would have when the shoe fit. It's just when I wrote the book, it was mostly to get fantasy to Indian readers because there was no fantasy book here. And again, it was with a small publisher I had to do a lot of legwork and I did a lot of research. But when initially the ball got set rolling was because of Mihir. He did a cover reveal, the Q&A, and that kind of sent the book out there to people like, okay, hey, there's a book like this, and then slowly people started buying it, and then Patrick's review came in, and then it again somersaulted on Goodreads, the TBR list. It's still unbelievable the fact that this book is doing so well outside India. And I mean, so far, when I just asked the stats from my publisher, that the book has sold a lot more outside India than inside so far. And so that's something which is unreal. And I'm really happy that because of this book, if there's one thing I can really claim success to, is because of this book, Indian readers know there's something called Grimdark, and it's a cool name. It's like, I know there's dark fantasy and there's grimdark, they both mean the same thing, but grimdark has this cool biker vibe to it. So I think that's what people are finding out, and they're discussing, okay, this is fantasy. When I speak about the fact that this is based on A Song of Ice and Fire and the Malazan series and the First Law series, it's taking them to those books because I think this genre can grow together as a whole, not just because of this one book. So when they start reading this, maybe they watch this video and hear us talking about Legends and Lattes or Terry Pratchett, they might go to those books. But that way, the fantasy books will start circulating in the Indian book market, and this genre will finally come back to what I believe is its birthplace.
Ethan said, "I want that copy from India. That's why I'm reading the ebook now. My friend will bring that copy from India in a couple of months. I live in Canada now."
Oh, you live in Canada, Anita? Oh, where? Oh my gosh! Always get excited when I hear fellow Canadians.
Yeah. Speaking of Fletcher, he's Canadian too. So
Yes.
watch out for those Canadians. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we're dangerous.
And Backer as well, right? Backer's
Canadian. So is Erickson. Erickson is Canadian.
There's a Canadian guy.
And this does not line up with any of the jokes that Ryan Reynolds cracks on Canadians, right? Like, they're all so docile and so nice and such good-natured people.
Yeah, pleasant.
Yeah. Jeremiah says, "I like that there is a reaction to Grimdark. Some are calling it hope punk." Esme says, "Us readers really love to come up with new boxes to put our books in."
Yes, we do.
True. Can confirm. Anita says,
"Oh, Toronto, fantastic! Nearby me. so only 3.5 hours away. So I was born and raised in Toronto, so love Toronto.
Cool. So I get the feeling we can talk for hours, but I know all of us have lives to live. But Gourav, there's a question I like to ask all the guests is, what was your first job?
Well, my first job, I was lawyer. So like, I think I started writing this. We have a concept which is called day zero. Like in our final year, on the first day, we get placed with different law firms, and I got lucky and I got placed in the first day. And so that suddenly, like, I had a lot of time then because I didn't have to like go for internships and try and look for jobs. And I just thought, okay, hey, why don't I use my time productively? And I wrote the first chapter of On the Darkness, and then I started balancing that with a law firm job. Whatever the show about lawyers on TV, it's not as glamorous. It's definitely more hardworking than that. So it was a little difficult, but it was a lot of fun. So this book took 4 years, and but yeah, I was a lawyer throughout, and I hope to continue to be. Just taking a, I had the bucket list that before I turn 30, I'll take a 1 year off, and luckily that coincided with the release of this book. So that's fun, and I'm trying to experiment with different professions right now. Yeah.
Nice, awesome.
Gaurav, should we keep an eye out for you for India's next comic or the next season of India's next comic or something like that?
Oh, I will definitely get banned then.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. But I wanted to thank everyone for coming by. Gourav, it's been a pleasure. I've learned so much from just this really short conversation. So thank you so much for coming by to visit with us. Where can people find you and your work? Where's your social media platform of choice?
Okay, so this is the fun and embarrassing portion. My Instagram handle is the King Beyond the Wall. I didn't want to change it. I kept it like years ago. So when people ask me, is Game of Thrones something that really influenced you? I'm like, yeah, my IG handle is still the King Beyond the Wall. So that's that. And my Twitter is Mohanty Gaurav #7, because like Voldemort, I believe in that magical power number. And or you can find my email address on my website, www.gauravmohanty.com, which I created after a lot of painstaking YouTube tutorials. It was horrible, but I think it looks pretty now. So go check it out.
Yeah, it looks really good.
Yeah,
I was looking at it. It looks really good. So job well done on that.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, good stuff. And that link is down below in the description and will be in the podcast too. So anyone looking to connect and check out Gourav's work. PL, where's a good place for people to find you?
Well, typically beside you and Taylor on Page Chewing on your channel or Taylor's channel. I'm also an assistant editor and blogger with Before We Go blog, as Steve is, led by the wonderful Beth Tabler, who's also a lead on Grimdark magazine. She is. You can find things about my books and me also on my website, www.plstore.com, where you can find about Dragon Kingdom Saga, the 2 books out, Lord and King, and Lord and King coming out this coming year in spring, hopefully. And the 2 books that are out right now are Dragon Kingdom and The Last of the Atalanteans. And also reviews on Goodreads. I love to read and review books. My passion, can't wait to get to Sons of Darkness, very high on my TBR. And just my DMs are open. Twitter's my preferred social media platform. I'm open. DMs are open. So you want to talk about reading, writing, etc., business related stuff, just send me a DM, and love engaging with people in the community. So thank you so much again, Steve, for having me on this.
Well, thank you for coming. And Mihir, where can people find you and bother you?
Well, I'm part of a wonderful team at fantasybookcritic.blogspot.com. It's made up of Lucas, Caitlin, Daniel, Shazzy, Matthew, and me. And you can always email us from our website link, but also on Twitter at Fantasy Book Critic. I also hang out at Steve's website forums as well. And just bug me anywhere. Happy to chat about books and happy to champion other books as well, indie and traditional published fantasy.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for coming by. Also, everyone in the chat. It was great interaction. It always adds to the conversation when we have active people in the chat asking questions. So go check out the book. And thanks again, everyone, for coming by. Hope to see everyone soon.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.